Shalom, shalom, everybody. Welcome to Reading with SHILO. What up? It's SHILO. I'm out here. And we in here today. We're going to finish off this book today. That is the plan on the agenda, to finish off. No, sir. Okay. Eat some more. I'm trying to finish off. We're going to finish off On the Real Side by Mr. Mel Watkins. A History of African American Comedy from Slavery to Chris Rock is what we're going to finish off. We're on the prior and the after. And we have section 3 of chapter 13 and the afterword to finish. So, yeah, it's going to be lengthy, man. It's going to be a lengthy one. For sure, an hour and a half. For sure. An hour and a half reading. I'm going to try to make it through a little bit quicker, but not like that much. Look at it. That's it till we finish. Got my dictionaries, highlighters, and pens. Highlighters. I got my highlighter. All right. So come on in. Welcome. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Come on in. And let's get section 3 started. Section 3 of chapter 13 of On the Real Side by Mr. Mel Watkins. Prior and thereafter. Prior and thereafter. Ooh. Prior and thereafter. Ooh. I don't remember. Don't forget, when I'm reading a lot of these books, man, these are my first time reading through. So the objective is to progress the reading skill, pronunciations, vocabulary, learn something, see what history what can we learn and grow from? Is there anything at all? Are there things that catch your eye or catch your ear? Just as there will be things that catch mine. So, hey, if you like it, they like it. If it's something that catch your ear, man, let me know what it is. Let's see what you got on your mind. But we're gonna finish. We're gonna finish it today, so I can add another notch on my list, man. I done stepped on 20 of them books. 20 of them books, and there's gonna be 21 I done stepped on. I'm out here. Book stepper. All right. Section 3. Section 3 of On the Real Side by Mr. Mel Watkins. Prior and thereafter. Volatile yet vulnerable. Crash but sensitive. Streetwise and cocky, but somehow still diffident and anxious. Richard Pryor emerged at the right time and brought with him the incredible array of dramatic and comic talent needed fully to introduce and popularize that unique, previously concealed or rejected part of African American humor that thrived in the lowest, most unassimilated portion of the Black community. Now, as Red Fox and others have pointed out, before the 60s, Pryor would probably have been banned from every club or theater in America. But America was being coerced into honestly confronting the hypocrisy of its past racial arrangements. The time for the surfacing of Black American humor, which had surreptitiously mocked those arrangements since slavery had arrived. Now, in the end, however, it was Pryor's finely tuned sensibilities and theatrical genius that brought it to the stage and expected its acceptance. Excuse me. Shit. I might need some water. The content of Pryor's comedy was not new, and perhaps more than any other popular comedian, He depended on perceptions and stories taken from real life characters and brought to stage particularly unaltered. Now, often, his routines were enriched by black folk humor. For example, the tale of the contest between two friends related by Mudbone. Hey, that nigga could tell lies. That's how we became friends. See? He tell a lie, I tell a lie. See? And we compliment each other's lies. He make me laugh all day. Bless his soul. He told me this lie one time. He told me about the niggas with the big dicks. See? Y'all ever heard it? The niggas had the biggest dicks in the world. And they were trying to find a place where they could have their contest. See? And they wasn't no freaks. Didn't want everybody looking. They was walking around looking for a secret place. So they walked across the Golden Gate Bridge and the nigga seen that water and make him want to piss. See, boy, say, man, I got to take a leak. He pulled out his thing and was pissing. The other nigga pulled his out, took a piss. One nigga say, God damn, this water cold. And the other nigga say, yeah, it is deep too. Although amplified by Pryor's perfectly pitched delivery through the character of Mudbone, it is a familiar folk story. Similar tales involve contests where scales are used. One involves Sam, the sweeper of the Southern General Store, who after he overweights his white opponents and wins the bet, returns home to his wife with the prize money. The wife. How'd you win all this money? We had a contest. What kind of contest was it? It was the dick weighing contest. You mean you done won all this money showing your dick? I only showed half of it. As Langston Hughes wrote, in the category of bawdy jokes, there are hundreds illustrating the prevalent folk belief in the amorous powers of the Negro male. Even more than from traditional folklore and folktales, Pryor drew from current street humor and the ordinary folk ways and attitudes of the people he grew up with and later met in urban nightclubs and bars. Unlike many collectors of black folk humor, who, as mentioned earlier, search primarily for jokes, tales, and other verbal examples of humor, Pryor was aware that much African-American humor is joke-free, attitudinal, and frequently visual. What he apparently gleaned from his own childhood experience and from observing pimps, conmen, hustlers, and other denizens of ghetto clubs and after-hours joints was that their indigenous humor was distinguished from most mainstream comedy by its overriding dependence on style in language, cryptic and often profane, and delivery, as well as its so close to the bone adherence to real human situations. Now, Pryor's comedy in many ways reflected the aspect of his father's personality that he most admired. Leroy Pryor, as the comedian said in one routine, was a man who was sometimes so scary I'd piss on myself when he called. But Pryor also said, my father was devastatingly funny and would tell the truth even if you didn't want to hear it. Now, on stage, he illustrated his father's brutally honest nature by dramatizing his behavior at Pryor's stepmother's funeral on one of the coldest days in the history of Peoria. Now, according to Pryor, he said, it gets any colder out here, they're gonna have to bury that bitch by herself. Well, it's fighting words. it get any cold out here, they're gonna have to bury that bitch by herself. The dirt. Get to the part with the dirt. Shit is cold. Yeah, baby. I love you, but shit, it's cold out here. The routine, which is greeted with roars of laughter from blacks and whites and Richard Pryor live in concert, is a representative example of Pryor's humor, both in its origin and comic technique. It includes nothing that ordinarily would be considered a joke, and instead Pryor realistically reenacts the actual incident that, from a polite mainstream perspective, was probably perceived as humorous because it was shocking, and for many blacks was funny because it truthfully mirrored an amusing and offbeat, but nevertheless common, down-to-earth aspect of black lower-class life. Yeah, it's cold out here. Trying to be out here all day. Bury that nigga. Nigga dead already. Shit. Oh. I be listening to dudes talking all over, Pryor said, in whorehouses and places. You know, everybody be talking the same kind of talk. You know, no matter what city you go to, you know, it's the same feeling, a universal feeling. That's what they be laughing at themselves. They see themselves when I do a character. The mannerisms and expressions of common black folk provided the material for most of his routines after 1971. Now, Bubba, a dude who could not tell a joke, but was so intimidating that everyone laughs anyway. And oh well, I don't take no ass whippings and don't know nothing about being unconscious. You gotta kill me. Well, based on bad niggas, the bad nigga types from his childhood. You know, besides his father, Pryor's grandmother was a rich source. She was realistically portrayed as the kind of harsh but loving matriarch who was the cornerstone of many African American families in the 50s and the 60s. She inspired Pryor's brilliant bit about being punished as a child. You know, my grandmother is the lady used to discipline me, you know, beat my ass. You know, anyone here remember them switches? You know, right? You used to have to go get them off of the tree yourself and take the leaves like that. I see them leaves today. I would kill one of them motherfuckers. My grandmother say, boy, go get me something to beat your ass with. And you know you couldn't come back with no little switch, right? Because if you did, she go out and get the tree and beat your ass with it. Then she fix you up. Come here, baby. Now, see, you wouldn't have done that. God damn. Now, see, you shouldn't have done that, God damn it. I told you not to. Just sit still now. And next time you do it, I'm going to tear your ass up again. My mama told me that shit. Oh, my mama Lily. My mama told me that for sure. Another routine documented her initial hysterical reaction at discovering Pryor using cocaine, as well as his panic and her practical folk response. Oh, man. Man, whoever on here, thank you for being here. Shalom, welcome. Can you please hit some, you know, say, hey, what's up? Say, y'all chill. You know, it's... So I know the chat work. I just want to know the chat work. You know, but let me know what's up. Yeah, but thank you for being here. Hope you enjoy the reading, as I am. You know. Another routine documented her initial hysterical reaction at discovering Pryor using cocaine, as well as his panic and her practical folk response. Mama, don't do that shit. I'm throwing the shit out. $1,600 worth of shit down the drain. She found out how much it cost. She said, "You dumb motherfucker. You could have sold that shit back to the man you bought it from. I told you that shit make you ignorant." Other tales of the peripheral inhabitants of the ghetto netherworld. I'm going to use some of these words, man. The ghetto netherworld. Thank you, Zachary. Thank you, Zachary. Thank you for coming out of YouTube under netherworld and putting the answer in the chat. Thank you. Other tales of the peripheral inhabitants of the ghetto netherworld were similarly based on actual interactions or observations. Now, Pryor obviously shaped and embellished the material as necessary, but as Bill Cosby noted, Richard Pryor is the only comedian that I know of today who has captured the total character of the ghetto. You know, his routines sometimes verged on dramatic readings on real ghetto behavior, exposing its follies and the stoic acceptance of day-to-day inequities and hardships. Humor emerged with the pathos, tensions, and subtle ironies attending that behavior. Now, given that he drew his comedy from the largely untapped reservoir of African-American street humor familiar to most Blacks, Pryor's genius did not reside so much in the creation of his material as in its presentation. You know, by the end of the 70s, he was at the top of his form. He had refined his physical gestures and facial expressions so much that he could indicate a shift in character or mood without saying a word. Mime had become an essential part of his comic repertoire. "I couldn't do it just by doing the words of the person," he told James McPherson. "I have to be that person. I see that man in my mind and go with him." He also had begun amplifying his routines by more frequently giving voices to animals and inanimate objects, a tack that enriched his performances with a resonance that transcended race. You know, the theatrical style was novel to many non-Blacks, and they were able more easily to appreciate, identify with his less direct expression of ethnicity. You know, many African Americans were aware, however, that the technique was part of the Black vocal style that, on occasion, required that the voice be used not so much for informational as deliberate textural purposes. Now, routines in which dogs, monkeys, pipes, or automobiles spoke in Black voices called forth images of antebellum animal tales and other oral techniques of Black storytellers or liars, in whose stories, as Roger D. Abrahams has noted, voice modifications and imitations become comic devices to build up dramatic interest. You know, by this time, Pryor's narrative voice had lost all traces of hesitancy. In his killing my car routine, for example, in a matter of seconds, he moves back and forth from his own narrative voice to anthropomorphic portrayals of various inanimate objects without the slightest hitch. The necklace say my name, SHILO. It's me. I carved it. I did it. Miss Lily. SHILO, the lawgiver. Oh, man. It seemed It seemed fair to kill my car to me, right? Because my wife was going to leave my ass, you know? I say, not in this motherfucker, you ain't. Oh, no, Lord. If you leave me, you be driving them hush puppies you got on, because I'm going to kill this motherfucker here. I had one of them big old magnums. You know, that noise that make when you shoot something. I shot it. Pew! Tire say, ah! It got good to me. I shot another one. Boom! Ah! And that vodka I was drinking said, go ahead, shoot something else. I shot the motor. Motor fell out the motherfucker, right? The motor say, fuck it. Then the police came. I went into the house because they got magnums too. And they don't shoot cars, they shoot niggas. By 1978, I'm about to say Magnum. By 1978, Pryor had put every facet of his stage act together. He had also proven himself as an actor. And in 1976, besides Silver Streak, he had supporting roles in Car Wash and the Bingo Long Traveling All-Stars and Motorcades. You know, those films were followed by starring roles in Which Way Is Up, which is, man, that's one of my, I love that movie, man. Which Way Is Up? If you ain't seen Which Way Is Up, go watch Which Way Is Up. And my favorite part in Which Way Is Up when, I can see it in my mind. There's a part in there where he find out his old lady was cheating with the I want to say the pastor. They found out he was cheating, so he addressed her. He addressed her in the kitchen, and he started choking her and shit, and he want to know why she cheating on him, and she tell him because he impotent, and he's like, impotent. He's like, impotent. I'm impotent. I got a whole nother family on the other side of town. He's like, I got a whole woman, and I got a son too, and he started going in, and when he started going in, boy, that lady face changed, and she grabbed that knife off the something. She grabbed a big butcher knife and she started going after that nigga with all type of stuff. And while he going at her, people was at the door, and Richard Pryor playing the daddy too, the daddy or the grandfather, I don't remember right now. But he playing multiple people in the movie, like how similar to how Eddie Murphy did, and in the Clumps and all the other Nutty Professors. And Martin did with Gina. I'm not Gina, with not Sinead, whoever. Roscoe and all other characters did some of the things. Hopping. But they was trying to get in. And he was the one at the door while everybody pushing behind him. And they finally got in, and Richard Pryor got his back to the door, and he trying to push in through the door. And his wife just threw the knife, and the knife hit in the door. Right by the old man. He was playing, he was like, oh, the bitch didn't go on dessert. And I guess his the way I can see his the facial expressions, the way he said it, and the facial expressions with it, and the way they was trying to close the door, and while Richard Pryor was trying to get out. Oh man, that's my favorite part of the movie, man. My cheeks hurt right now thinking about it. Oh boy. Which Way Is Up? Go watch it. Which Way Is Up in 1977. Those films were followed by starring roles in Which Way Is Up in 1977, Grease Lightning in 1977, Blue Collar in 1978, California Style in 1978, and The Wiz in 1978. With his status as a bankable Hollywood draw firmly in place, he again turned to the concert stage and had a chance to do what I really love. He told Rolling Stone reporter David Felton, I just had to go out and work. That's all I know. I got in touch with my people again. After about 4 months of preparation, excuse me. After about 4 months of preparation, he was on the road again. The 1978 tour featured his most polished work to date, excerpts from the concerts were released on the album Wanted Richard Pryor's Live and in Concert 1979. More significantly, since Pryor was increasingly using his acting ability and emphasizing visual embodiment of his character to maximize the comic effect, he agreed to allow a concert to be filmed for the first time since 1971. In January of 1979, at the Terrace Theater in Long Beach, California, the performance that would be released as Richard Pryor live in concert in 1979 was filmed. In the estimate of many critics, it was Pryor's finest comedy performance. Damn, now my nose want to start getting like this. Certainly, that movie presents a smoother, more expansive and poised Richard Pryor than had been seen or heard earlier in the decade. And most notably, he ventures more into mime and vocal impersonations of animals, objects, even parts of his own body. In fact, although no written account can convey the near magical physical transformations that enhance Pryor's mimicry, those theatrical vignettes produced some of the movie's most remarkable moments. In his account of hunting with his father as a child, for example, he reenacts the sounds and atmosphere of the woods with eerie accuracy, and in one of the film's many high points, brilliantly mimics the tremulous anxiety of a deer drinking water. Comic portraits of his squirrel monkeys, his guard dogs, and his next door neighbor's vicious German shepherd are just as arresting. In each instance, Pryor not only gives voice to the animals, but also assumes their physical appearance. Pryor's face, for example, melts into an expression of concern and confusion when, as a German shepherd, he looks up and says, "What's the matter, Rich?" But quickly switches to an expression of inconsolable grief when, as himself, he mutters, "My monkeys died." He effortlessly alternates viewpoints. "Say what? Your monkey's dead? Ain't that a bitch? You mean the monkeys used to be in the trees? They died? Say, yeah, they died. Say, shit, I was gonna eat them too." Don't linger on that shit too long, it'll fuck with you. Say, I try. Yeah, you take care. Then I went back and jumped over the fence, and just before he jumped, he looked back at me and said, "Now you know I'm going to be chasing you again tomorrow." And now my nose want to start getting all stuffy and shit. The most riveting and funny anthropomorphic, but in the performance, however, focuses on an unlikely subject for the comedy routine. The heart attack Pryor had experienced some years earlier. Again, depicting both of his actions and comments, as well as those of the vindictive heart speaking in the fierce, irreverent tones of the ghetto authority figure. Pryor produced a comic mini-drama that far exceeded the boundaries of ordinary stage comedy. I was out walking in the front yard. I was just walking along and something say, "Don't breathe." Looking from side to side and pressing his fist into his chest. Huh? Say, You heard me, motherfucker. I said, don't breathe. Wincing in pain as he twists his fist into his chest. Okay, I won't breathe. I won't breathe. I won't breathe. Then shut the fuck up. Okay, I'll shut up. Don't tell me, don't kill me, don't kill me. Get on one knee and prove it. Dropping to one knee, Pride shrieks. I'm on one knee. Don't kill me. The relentless interchange continues as Pryor, writhing and gasping for air after collapsing on the stage, is excruciating for eating all that pork. 10 grapes. That's it. You gotta eat more than that. You gotta eat more. Go get, matter of fact, bust me open one of them bags of the big oranges. Bust me open a bag of the big oranges and bring me 2 of them big oranges. Please, if you don't mind, sir. Kindly. Thank you kindly. Oh, man. The relentless interchange continues as Pryor, breathing and gasping for air after collapsing on the stage, is excruciating for eating all that pork and ignoring the fact that Black people are susceptible to high blood pressure. Then Pryor sits up, shifting back to his normal voice. You be thinking about shit like that when you think you're gonna be dying. You put in an emergency call to God too, right? After Pryor reenacts an abortive call to God, the voice of his heart intrudes again. Was you trying to talk to God behind my back? When Pryor nervously shakes his head and mumbles, no, I wasn't. He is flung back down on the stage as his heart bellows. You was a lying motherfucker. You was. The routine concludes with, I woke up in an ambulance, right? And there wasn't nothing but white people staring at me. I say, ain't this a bitch? I done died and wound up in the wrong motherfucking heaven. Now I gotta listen to Lawrence Welk the rest of my day. This is classic Pryor. A perfect illustration of his taking the audience to the peak of emotion and topping it off with a nice laugh. The concert marked a departure in that Pryor avoided most of the ghetto street types that had peopled his earlier work. Instead, he focused primarily on personal experiences, his parents, children, and friends, even his pets and health. Later, he said he had been purging himself, facing them demons and wiping them out. Still, there was occasionally striking references to differences between Black and white culture, as in the concluding line of the heart attack routine, or another bit that concentrated racial behavior at funerals, or his comment about the Doberman pinchers policemen sometimes use. They fast too. They catch the average white boy. Some of the most caustic material surfaced during the opening when Pryor toyed with the audience, saying, the fun part for me is when white people come back after intermission and find out niggas done stole their seats. The nasal voice he adopted for his portrayals of middle-class whites. Weren't we sitting here, dear? Yes, we were sitting right there. Then shift to a deeper, more threatening tone. Well, you ain't sitting here now, mother. Oh, excuse me. Thank you very much, sir. What you doing, nigga? Thank you very much. So I appreciate it. Ooh, you feel like some good. This one feel funny. This one feel good. I think I'm gonna eat this one first. Since my nose wanna start running on me. All right, go down the hall so I can say these words. Thank you, sir. Can I help you with anything else? And no, sir, you can't have it. No, sir, you cannot. Not now. What time it is? Let me see what time it is. In a little bit. After I finish reading. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. After I finish reading. Weren't we sitting here, dear? Yes, we were sitting right there. Well, then shifting to a deeper, more threatening tone. Well, you ain't sitting here now, motherfucker. A little bit about Los Angeles police accidentally killing a black man with their chokehold was just as biting. Hey, shit! He broke! Can you break a nigga? Is it okay? Let's check the manual. Yep, page 8. You can break a nigga right there. See? Break a nigga. The break a nigga hole. If you so happen to break a nigga, don't worry about it. They breakable. Niggas is breakable. Overall, however, the audience enjoyed the mellow over, more subtle prior. He seemed less intent on shocking or focusing on racial contrast and more concerned with including blacks and whites in the humor, finding a common ground. Finally, although the concert was steeped in genuine African American humor and delivered in a predominantly black voice, it was a concert that only Richard Pryor, with his acting ability and uncanny knack for mimicry and mime, could have successfully performed. He had taken the humor of the streets, Black America's presumably low comedy, with much of its vulgarity, profanity, explicit sexuality, and unvarnished satirical perception, and without losing any of its intensity, turned it into high art. Quips and perceptions that had been brought to the stage almost unaltered and presented with a defiant attitude at the beginning of the decade were now delivered with less overt hostility. Oh, I knew that shit was going to happen. Come on, bust it open for me. Bust that orange open while I'm trying to eat. That thing right. Man. Ooh, that thing good. Oh, yeah. Oh, boy. I needed that. My bad. I needed that. I feel my nose clearing up already. And I just want to eat this right quick before I continue. So nothing else slow me down. Mm-hmm. All right. He had devised a tactic that allowed him both to express the satirical thrust of black street humor and to expose the human ironies and frailties that lay beneath it. His genius was to demonstrate its vulnerability. With live and concert, in fact, he has shown that nearly undiluted African American street humor, much of it expressed in vernacular language and little of it cloaked in middle class propriety, could appeal to all audiences, regardless of race. Pryor had tapped the broader human source of his ethnic comedy, and even mainstream critics raved. Newsweek called the concert the peak of Pryor's art, one of the funniest movies ever made. A critic for the New York Times wrote, prowling the stage impishly, slipping effortlessly from one hilarious impersonation to the next, Pryor radiates an intensity that is often visible in even his very best feature-length acting performances. David Felton wrote in Rolling Stone that while he regretted the absence of familiar characters such as Pryor's preachers, drunks, and junkies, and Mudbone, the performance is more unified and more personal. He doesn't just tell us about the stuff like most comedians tell jokes. He brings it to life and exposes its soul. The New Yorker critic Pauline Kael declared the film a consummation of his years as an entertainer. One of the greatest performances we'd ever seen and ever would see. Pryor's breakthrough and an increased appeal to mainstream white audiences partially derived from the selection of material for the live concert. Focused on his personal life, family and friends, celebrities and show business associates, and the consequent absence of characters unique to ghetto street life allowed non-blacks to identify more readily with the humor. Moreover, as the concert demonstrated, Pryor's brutally honest presentation of African American humor extended beyond authentic portrayals of black language, candid engagement of taboo subjects such as sex, and emphasis of African American comic view of whites. It also exposed blacks' comic view of themselves. Like Zora Neale Hurston, Pryor was aware of the many-faceted nature of genuine black humor and did not insist that it always reflected positive race consciousness. His scathing wit lampooned mainstream arrogance, insecurities, and racism, but also attacked the infirmities and pretenses of black life. Let me read that again. His scathing wit lampooned mainstream arrogance, insecurities, and racism, but also attacked the infirmities and pretenses of black life. Pryor's cockiness and assertiveness was balanced by an introspection and vulnerability that permitted him to jest not only about the less manly or condemnable aspects of his own personality, but also about the less militant and exemplary aspects of black life in general. Earlier quips such as, I seen a Chinese man have 2 sticks like this and bowl of food. Didn't drop a goddamn speck. Nigga lose 3 pounds of food with a knife and a fork. The warning of black character goes into extraterrestrial beings when they arrive on Earth. Better get your ass away from around here. You done landed on Miss Gilmore's property. All his. Why should you be happy? Why should you be happy? Job regarding relationships with white women reflected his willingness to satirize blacks. In the live concert, although he echoed earlier tales of blacks' physical and sexual progress, He undercut those rigid macho posturings of less guarded admissions. At one point he said, if somebody pulls a knife on you and you can't pull it out nothing, but you had with your skin on it, your intelligence ought to tell you to run. And teach your old lady how to run so you don't have to go back after her ass. After describing how some blacks boast, I can fuck 8-9 hours, Jack, he quipped. You some lying motherfuckers. You can make love for about 3 minutes. I do about 3 minutes of serious fucking. Then I need 8 hours of sleep and a bowl of Wheaties. His honest display of vulnerability transcends race, permitting nearly everyone to identify with him. You know, such middle-class white Americans as an editor at the Manhattan cocktail party and a salesman at the Youngstown, Ohio motel bar talked about his ability to strip away pretense and the way he cuts right through the bullshit to make you laugh at yourself. A hip young female bartender from Manhattan said, he was the first black comedian doing ethnic material that I had ever been exposed to. Even though some people thought they were obscene, we were including Pryor's one-liners in almost every conversation. And a prim Staten Island housewife commented, we had all listened to Bill Cosby growing up, but that was extremely tame and could be listened to in your mother's house with the door open. Then along came Pryor, speaking the way we only spoke amongst ourselves and about things we wouldn't dare. His jokes were risque and a welcome break from the silliness of George Carlin and Robert Klein. You know, Pryor was outraged and angry and willing to put himself into his material, often to the extent of being the butt of his own joke. Pryor gave substance to the types that were outcast even in the ghetto, and despite the comical cast that he often gave them, overall, there was an aura of truth about his characters. It was not accidental. You know, people react because they know exactly what I mean. He said in one interview, art is the ability to tell the truth, especially about oneself. You know, on the other occasion, he added, I think there's a thin line between being a Tom on them people. That didn't make too much sense. I think there's a thin line between being a Tom on them people and seeing them as human beings. When I do, the people I have to do it true. If I can't do it, I'll stop right in the middle rather than pervert it and turn it into Tomism. I guess I wonder what that means. Tom, I wonder what it means. There's a thin line between to laugh with and to laugh at. Pryor rarely crossed that line, and consequently, for many blacks, his humor afforded a cathartic experience, a public purging of embarrassments and frustrations built up over decades of concealing real attitudes and cultural preferences, suppressing customs that largely defined existence from them. For those African Americans who, like myself, were in his generation, Pryor's exuberant portrayal of humorous but real black folks inspired a release similar to what Flip Wilson must have felt when he was struck by the revelation that niggas is fun. Many young blacks, even those from middle-class backgrounds, had similar reactions. In If I Stop, I'll Die by Dennis Williams, who attended college in the 70s, wrote, it gave brothers like me who had done little time in the streets a new, hip way of expressing ourselves and a license to do so. triumph, struggle, despair. It was all there. He was telling them off and taking them to school even as he taught and entertained. Pryor's comedy went beyond merely giving substance and external validation to the attitudes and perceptions of ghetto types. Ultimately, it humanized them, made them as memorable and indelible as the creations of some of our best novels. As Stephen Allen points out, there is a sense in which Pryor is much closer to literature than to traditional nightclub or concert comedy. And because of his irreverent approach, the literature that his comedy most closely mirrors is that found in black humor fiction by writers like John Barth or Charles Wright, Thomas Berger, and Bruce J. Friedman, and Ishmael Reed. Fiction that, according to one analyst, seems to have little respect for the values and patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior that have kept Anglo-American culture stable and effective, have provided a basis of equilibrium for society and the individual. In fact, Pryor's comic contrast of black and white behavior directly lampoons the hypocrisy and pretense of many Anglo-American social and critical patterns, and often depicted them as fatuous and obtuse. Early quips such as, if my hair is straight, then whitey dig me. So I got a process wrong. Humorously alluded to the social alienation and identity crisis that is common in Black humor as the literary genre, and more specifically echoed the same comically abortive of effort to be accepted in America's great society that Charles Wright explored in The Wig. Pryor's wino and junkie routine, especially the wino's pungent concluded rejoinder. You don't know how to deal with the white man. That's your problem. I know how to deal with him. That's why I'm in the position I'm in today. As clearly suggests the darker undertones and ironies, the stultified dilemmas that connect his comedy to the genre of Black humor. The connection, however, seemingly derived from Pryor's dogged presentation of authentic Black humor and street humor, that from any effort to simulate literary fabulous. As mentioned earlier, there are numerous similarities between the circumstances that inspired literary Black humor, alienation from the irrational, impersonal society, and those that inspired much African American humor. Ostracism. Ostracism. Let's see what that is. Let's see what the hell that is. Oh, ostracism. I'm saying it wrong. Ostracism. I know what that is. Ostracism. Like to be ostracized. Much African American humor, ostracism from mainstream society and its irrational racial arrangements. But not all African American humor is so pessimistic and angst-ridden. Compared to the typical hero in Black humor fiction, who finds that his suffering is immedicable, and whose attempt to locate the alternative to his condition only confronts him more starkly with the formlessness responsible for it. Blacks could more easily identify the cause of their ostracism. So while there are many examples of African American humor in which the joke turns on a stoic acceptance of the seemingly irresolvable nature of racism, where the Black folks hang out, many others either aggressively pinpoint the source, non-blacks, and find comic relief in ridiculing it or avoiding the issue altogether, turning to non-racial themes. Now, Pryor reflected these less torturous aspects of African American comedy just as authentically. And in fact, in many ways, Pryor's comic repertoire comprised of practical inventory of those central elements that, taken together, distinguish African American humor from other ethnic varieties. One such element is the frequently off-color vernacular speech of Black common folks. By revealing its underlying meaning, emphasizing its implicit emotive significance, Pryor transformed it from mere vulgarity to a resonant expression of a worldview that is insensitively down to earth and bluntly realistic. His language mirrored the explicit obscenity and hyperbole of urban street folk, and alternatively, the subtle, guileful misdirection of rural blacks. And in each instance, his voice was perfectly pitched, laden with satiric undertones and defiance. Naturally, his approach was scorned by some, but Pryor insisted, "There is no such thing as profanity in what I do. I talk to people in their own words." And still, as social scientists William Labov, Paul Cohen, Clarence Robbins, and John Lewis point out in Toast, a linguistic study of street lore, African American street vernacular defies the values of middle class society in respect to language. In its use of taboo words and scorn for sentimental and abstract verbiage. It does not, however, reject the aesthetic values of poetry, and others look beyond the surface vulgarity. The critic, Pauline Kael, hailed Pryor as a master of lyrical obscenity. Thank you. Working at it, trying to get better, my boy. Trying to get better, Mr. Geeks. In addition, Pryor's performances were enhanced by his body language, by insinuating the wary, slump-shouldered, but stoic posture of rural types or hip, swaggering, crotch-grabbing, head-bobbing urban black persona into the public forum without ridicule or condescension. Pryor forced recognition of African American types that society had either burlesqued or vicariously spurned. Aside from the linguistic and physical mannerisms that defined his comic approach, Pryor, more than any previous comic, mirrored the full range of African American humor. Dick Gregory had exposed the wit and acerbic social commentary that often infuses Black humor. Bill Cosby had advanced the art of storytelling or lying in his act. And while introducing upbeat comic characters steeped in Black street lore, Flip Wilson had revealed not only Blacks' pride in their folks' ways, but also the exuberance and joy of much Black humor. Pryor incorporated all these attributes and thereby completely unmasked the complex matrix of pride, self-mockery, blunt confrontation of reality, double-edged irony, satiric wit, assertive defiance, poetic obscenity, and verbal acuity that finally define the elusive entity that may be called African American humor. For sure, Mr. Zachary Geeks. For sure. That's what's up. All praises. All praises. Welcome. Hopefully we read many more. It was nothing short of revolutionary. Pryor had finally integrated style and substance. He was the first African-American stand-up comedian to speak candidly and successfully to integrated audiences the way Black people joked among themselves when most critical of America. It was a revolution that perhaps only Pryor with his unusual background and astonishing array of dramatic and comic skills could have accomplished. For although African Americans' folk humor is essentially shaped by their African heritage and a shared ironic vision derived from their American experience, its expressive forms are diverse. By enliving all these voices, from the self-effacing trickery of the slave John to the articulate, satiric wit of Dick Gregory to this secretary hyperbole of the legendary Shine. Let's see what this secretary is. I don't know what this, I never heard that. This secretary. Desk secretary. DESSECRETORY. The secretary, not the secretary. The secretary. Let's see what it's talking about. The secretary. Desecrate. Desecratory. Profane. I guess it has something to do with that. And that's why I'm pronouncing it wrong. The secretary. That's why I wasn't understanding it. The secretary. To profane. It's not in here, but it sounds like a desecrate. So I assume it has something to do with desecrating something. To the desecratory hyperbole of the legendary Shine, Pryor asserted himself as the authentic embodiment of the Black comic spirit. And only Burt Reynolds before him, in a restricted, oblique manner, had neared such a consummate representation of African American humor. If Burt Williams was, as some claim, the finest American comedian of his time, then Pryor had inherited that mantle. And without doubt, he changed America's attitude towards Black folk humor, lifting it from obscurity and establishing it as a permanent form of humorous expression. By the 80s, the American comedy scene was undergoing a period of tremendous expansion. The popularity of stand-up comedy had reached new heights, and comedy clubs were surfacing not only in New York, Los Angeles, and other large cities, but also in small towns across the country. Pryor's ascendancy, which had affected a literal emancipation of the African American humor, combined with the flood of new outlets for performers, opened opportunities for a raft of new, young talents. Although Pryor starred in 2 more excellent concert films, Live on Sunset Strip in 1982 and Here and Now in 1983, and several less commendable standard movies, his career declined as the result of a near-fatal accident and failing health. Yes, sir. What you running for, hollering for? Like something wrong, sir. Yeah, you don't be running up here and nobody trying to get you, boy. I'm reading, boy. You can come listen if you want to, my son. But don't be up in here hooping and hollering. I'm trying to read. All right. Hey, look. Hey, don't come up in here playing while I'm reading. You understand?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You can be in here. I don't mind you being in here. But when you're in here, what do you need to do?
Be quiet.
And what else?
And Sit down.
And what else?
Don't run.
And listen. You have to be able to listen to learn anything. So while that is reading, which I don't mind, I actually want you in here. I want you in here while I'm reading so you can hear me read. So that way you don't be scared to read and maybe you'll read more. But while you're in here and I'm reading, I need you to be quiet because other people want to hear me read. Other people want to hear the story. So you can come in here, you need to be quiet, sit down, find your seat, pull up a bean bag, pull up a chair, pull up something, sit on the couch. Find somewhere, have a seat, get yourself comfortable.
I don't tell you what you don't mean tired because times 2, please.
Say that again, sir.
But I don't tell you when you done when you're tired because times 2, please.
Yes, sir, when I'm done.
Right, that was in that big oranges.
All right. You made me lose my spot. Pick a head. By the 80s. All right. There we go. All right. His influence, however, as attested by the comic stars who gathered for a September 1991 tribute, was firmly entrenched. Eddie Murphy was the first of the bright young wits to emerge. In 1982, one journalist reported, "Not since Richard Pryor has a black comic played such dauntlessly, and so adroitly with racial and racist stereotypes." By 1985, along with Pryor and Bill Cosby, he had become one of America's leading crossover stars. In fact, by age 23, Murphy had assumed Pryor's spot as a top black comic. Newsweek called him the hottest star in Hollywood. Heavens, the closest anybody gets to a sure thing in box office terms. Typically, he was unserved in his praise of Pryor. In his first film concert, Delirious, in 1983 on HBO, he demonstrated how much Pryor had affected his comic style. The performance was liberally diced with material that recalled earlier Pryor routines. A bit about the Amityville horror in which Murphy contrasts the cinema image of whites' apparent obliviousness to clear warnings of imminent danger with blacks' instant recognition, for example, is but a heartbeat away from Pryor's lampooning of The Exorcist. Murphy also occasionally lapses into a Pryor-like nasal impersonation of an average American white man. Still, he is much more than the Pryor clone in the film. His own brand of cocksure, irreverent, evident. A master at comic mimicry, his burlesque and celebrities he burlesques such celebrities as Bill Cosby, Mr. T, Elvis Presley, James Brown, Michael Jackson, and Stevie Wonder with caricatures that, though often cruel, Luther Vandross, for instance, is described as a big Kentucky Fried Chicken eating motherfucker. This big Kentucky Fried Chicken eating are almost unruling accurate as impersonations, and a monologue about his father conveys an uproarious sense of the distinctive attributes of the working class black family. The young Murphy did not display the subtle textured resonance of Pryor's humor, but perhaps that was asking too much. Murphy represented a new, youthful African-American comic voice, one inspired by the audaciousness of Shine, but unapprised of the subtle manipulation of trickster like John the Slave, and he is sometimes teetered on the brink of excess. Now, Stentorian and superficial profanity, crash indulgence in bravado, homophobia, and sexism, his usual outrageous parodies were often perfectly conceived and executed. Many characters that he introduced on Saturday Night Live during his 1981 to 1984 stint remain memorable, although they were Mr. Robinson's, a takeoff of the Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood children's show, Tyrone Green, a racist black author, and Velvet Jones, a pimp who hawked his book, How to Be a Hoe. How to Be a Hoe. Just come work for me. How to Be a Hoe. Are you a female high school dropout? Between the ages of 16 and 25. It sounds like, I just realized, have you used Roundup in your yard? Then you may be due a settlement. Oh, it's good too. Are you a female high school dropout between the ages of 16 and 25? Are you tired of lying around in bed all day with nothing to do? Well, you need never get up again. Because in six short weeks, I can train you to be a high-paying hoe. $1,500 a week without ever leaving the comforts of your own bed. Some bits also boldly touch on political issues that most comics avoided. In one, imitating Jesse Jackson, Murphy appeared with a doo-wop backup group and couched on an apology to Jews in a song, Don't Let Me Down, Hammy Town. The lyrics go, I was your one and only until I read the news. Now I'm sad and lonely since I put down the Jews. We have so much in common because we both seem so oppressed. We both have big noses and gold chains on our chests. Don't let me down. I'm begging you, please. Don't let me down. I'm down on my knees. Don't let me down, Hammy Town. While not exactly traditional political satire, the routine demonstrates Murphy's willingness to lampoon any individual or group. There you go. Get it. Anybody can get it. Equal opportunity. Murphy's boyish charm and audacious approach, as affirmed by a television comedy special, A Laugh, a Tear, made him the comedian of the 80s on television and in a series of movies, including 48 Hours in 1982, Trading Places in 1983, Beverly Hills Cop in 1984, Raw in 1984, 1987, excuse me. Beverly Hills Cop 2 in 1987, and Harlem Nights, great movie, in 1989, he flaunted an irrepressible macho comic image that reflected the brazen impetuousness of a brash hip-hop culture empathized by gangster rappers who, as Henry Louis Gates has said, take the white Western culture's worst fear of black men and make a game of it. The 80s also saw the rise of Whoopi Goldberg, a comedian, a comedienne whose television special, Fontaine, Why Am I Straight, presented an array of characters that subtly fused comedy and drama. An Oscar-winning actress, as well as a stand-up comedy, Goldberg demonstrated a comic range that rivaled Pryor's in a riveting performance, featuring such characters as the intellectual junkie Fontaine, a naive Western Indian maid, and a black child who fantasizes about having straight hair. In that special, Goldberg provided that she could prove that she could be as blasphemous as Murphy, but her humor spotlighted social and political satire as well as straight-out parody. We almost to the afterward. Excuse me. All right. Man, them oranges was good. Oh, boy, the oranges was good. Among others who made their marks in the 80s and early 90s were Arsenio Hall, Robert Townsend, Marshall Warfield, Keenan Ivory Wayans, George Wallace, Chris Rock, Sinbad, Damon Wayans, and Martin Lawrence. The extraordinary range represented by these comics was matched by such theatrical presentations as Joseph Papp's production of The Colored Museum in 1985 and Lincoln Center's presentation of Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston's Mulebone in 1991, and a television debut of shows ranging from the subtle humor of Frank's Place on CBS in 1987 to 1988, and The Cosby Show on CBS in 1984 to 1991, which is one of my favorites. I think that thing, still can be watched today. I wish I had all the seasons on DVD. I would let my boys watch that. To the outrageous parody of In Living Color on Fox in 1990, or the in-your-face mayhem of Russell Simmons' Def Comedy Jam and HBO of 1992. Pryor's groundbreaking unveiling of genuine African-American folk humor had led to an explosion of more authentic Black comedy in nearly every media outlet. By the 90s, it was not unusual to see guests on the Arsenio Hall show engaging in verbal banter, even outright signifying that 2 decades ago might have only been heard at Black social gatherings. On one show, for instance, Will Smith, star of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air on NBC in 1990, and Hall engaged in a lively round of mother rhyming at another comic's expense. Will: his mama's so dumb she tried to cook a TV dinner on a television set, tried to change the channels. Hall: I saw his mama at Supercuts, and when she sat down to get a haircut, she opened her skirt. Smith: his mama so bald, when she go to sleep at night, her head keeps slipping off the pillows. On the less frivolous note, In Living Color frequently featured parodies and satirical routines with a more cutting edge. The show's brightest comic, Damon Wayans, for instance, portrayed a homeless but militant derelict who, in one skit, aggressively imposes himself on middle-class society. When he appears at an army recruiting center in his usual slovenly and disheveled state and announces, "I'm here to be all I can be," the staff scatters in disgust. as the brash, and pugnacious black clown homie, Wayans regularly ridiculed middle-class ideal and satirized the image of a cheerful, kindly clown. During a puppet show in the one episode, Homie berates the figure named Mr. Establishment for trying to hold me down in the structured society, so Homie ends up in jail. In another skit, he allows some admin to think he has abandoned his militancy and joined the establishment until he gets opportunity to see the man. Then, shouting, "You can't buy homie!" he proceeds to attack him verbally and physically. "You can't buy homie!" I remember that. African American humor had arrived in mainstream America not only in force, but also with a healthy variety that reflected nearly all its main facets. In addition to entertainment for the observant, it offered what George Meredith called thoughtful laughter and provided a needed and valuable insight. The comic spirit Meredith wrote in an essay on comedy lingers overhead, and when it sees mankind self-deceived or hoodwinked, given to run riot in idolatries, drifting into vanities, congregating in absurdities, planning short-sightedly, plotting dementedly, whenever they offend sound reason, fair justice, or false in humility or mind with conceit, it cast an oblique light on them, followed by volleys of silvery laughter. The laughter that accompanies a similar vision has echoed throughout Black life from nearly the inception of slavery, through Washington Irving's observance of obstreperous peals of broad-mouthed laughter in the 19th century and on to the present. But misconstrued or ignored, it was either labeled as naive, Sambo-like tomfoolery, or silenced and relegated to the society's darkest and most inconspicuous corners. By the 80s, displayed center stage and often in prime time without distortion, its meaning had become obvious to nearly everyone. Since African Americans have been inescapably engaged with the absurdity of America's racial arrangements for centuries, survival and sanity dictated that they adopt the comic view of society. As Ralph Ellison put it, because of knowing the reality of a society, that he had the power to treat you as though you were actually inferior, but knowing within yourself that you were not, you were thrown into a position in which you yourself but knowing within yourself that you are not, you are thrown into a position in which you were either going to develop a sense of humor or die of frustration, of a sense of a sense of the irrational. Sorry, I'm missing words. With the growing popularity of comedy in general, that initially enforced viewpoint, along with the other satirical perspectives, is being more widely disseminated. Ultimately, the skepticism and self-scrutiny implicit in embracing of the comic vision may help to heal the wounds of the nation groomed on racism, sexism, and the easy acceptance of denigrative stereotypes, those offenses to sound reason and fair justice that Meredith mentions. The critic Wiley Seffer suggests as much. perception of the self as comic touches the quip, and honest self-inspection must bring a sense of comical. This kind of awareness is an intention in is an initiation into the civilized condition. It lightens the burden of selfishness, cools the heat of the ego, makes us impressionable by others. And Meredith was an optimistic when he wrote the comedy. That comedy is the ultimate civilizer. Comedy, of course, can be distorted when used to deny others humanity or to inflate and justify our own vanities. It belies the lofty ideals of the comic spirit, which is derived from common sense perception and honest engagement of reality. The foregoing survey has offered numerous examples of humor being put to less laudable purposes. The key lies with individuals who are able to laugh at themselves as well as others. And no society is in good health without laughing at itself quietly and privately. An astute critic wrote, "No character is sound without self-scrutiny, and the comic vision assures that those who embrace it maintain vigilance on themselves, even as they satirize the hypocrisy and follies of others." Most African Americans, as W.E.B. Du Bois and Ellison noted, have been compelled to view themselves through the eyes of others, to engage in intensified critical self-observation. They have also scrutinized other Americans and examined the contradictions that erode their claims of superiority. Black American humor is finally based on those perceptions. It is the shared ironic vision of a group who, in seeking to establish their place as Americans, have skeptically viewed the gap between appearances and reality and have often found contradiction and absurdity. Still, categorically defining African American humor is tricky. As I mentioned at the outset, no one yet has definitively described humor in general. Since Black humor is doubly masked, that is, it often pretends to be naive or cloaks as satire in a mask of innocence. It presents an especially knotty problem. Luigi Pirandello's metaphor of body and shadow looms as the most fitting and enlightening definition. African Americans have been cast as a shadow-like presence in America since their arrival in the 17th century. From the mainstream perspective, they have been incentively portrayed as outsiders, attempting to duplicate the customs and behavior of European Americans, and ridiculed for not succeeding. That portrayal not only has surfaced in social theory and conceptual analysis of Blacks, but also was enforced as social reality and perpetuated by media depictions of cultural icons. For instance, the Negro Caruso, the Black Lenny Bruce. Moreover, in a curiously ironic turn, it has surfaced in popular entertainment where even non-Blacks obviously imitated Blacks. They struggled to give the impression that the mimicry was reversed. Although Thomas D. Rice, one of the earliest Ethiopian delineators, had initially based his act on his impression of the Negro stablehand, he performed a shadow dance in which a Black child, after emerging from the gunny sack that Rice carried over his shoulder, would imitate his every move. In the early 20th century, Ted Williams used a similar act. A Black performer would follow him about the stage, duplicating and sometimes comically exaggerating his movements as he played me and my shadow. In more sardonic vein, the surfacing of a joke based on the hero of the 1950s radio show, The Shadow, who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The shadow do. In the 70s, reflected America's continued fascination with casting African Americans in shadow imagery. The imagery also has folk and literary roots, and has spawned serious psychological inquiry. The shadow or double, the critic and humorologist Stanley Trachtenberg contends, bring to the consciousness the acceptable desires of the ego, and characteristically takes the form of the opposition between a social self and a repressed instinctual impulse. The double invites comic treatment, and here again, the similarity between the shadow image and Black's assigned social position as both. A comic symbol and an embodiment of American uninhibited. Now, uninhibited, immoral instincts reaffirms African Americans' symbolic status as a shadow presence in America. And if we accept African Americans' role as a shadow presence in America, along with Pirandello's explanation of the comic interaction between shadow and body, the shadow, stretches this much or grows that much fatter, as if to take or make fun of the body, which all this time does not concern itself with the shadow or its size. A striking and vividly revealing image emerges. No, sir, not yet. African American humor can be seen as a shadowy comic vision that satirizes and humanizes America's main body. As Pirandello suggested, it variously stretches and turns, creating grotesque apparitions or comic shades that reflect the perfidy and concealed desires of the mainstream. Sometimes, as at high noon, it may coincide perfectly with the main body, demonstrating a convergence of humor and social aspirations. But usually it veers to this side or the other, twisting widely and ridiculing a mainstream that vainly attempts to legitimize its rigid and often absurd pretense of decorum and propriety. The Black humorist, Oblique Light, is not aimed to mainstream America alone, however. It is also directed at African Americans and focused on their follies as well. For most of America's past, the main body has been more or less unmindful of its own comical disfiguration. But from the slaves' animal tales and old John Trickster tales, Bert Williams' comic pathos, Stephen Fetch's willful lethargy, and Shine's outrageous exploits, and the rolling eyes and quick exits of cinema clowns like Matten Moreland and Wiley Best, through Moms and Pig Meat's ribaldry, and down-home spoofing, Butterbeans and Susie's domestic shadowboxing, the significant Monkeys' wily bombast, Kingfisher's shenanigans, and the innovations of Rogers, Russell, White, and Fox on to Gregory's wit, Cosby's charm, Wilson's effervescence, Reed and Ellison's pointed satire, and the genius of Richard Pryor, Black America's comic vision has consistently focused on the mainstream as well as on itself. Ooh-wee. Now in the 70s, released from the dark, inconspicuous corners where its imagery was hidden and obscured, Black humor assumed a more prominent role in America's social satire. Now, with its newfound exposure, it is perhaps more bold and belligerent, but not surprising. It still thrives on irony as well as comedy, as all comedy is inclined to. Now, as Langston Hughes suggested, humor, humor boomerangs. Things are often funny because we don't know we're laughing at ourselves. And African American humor, after all, still sardonically amplifies the 70s vernacular joke. Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? Indeed, the shadow do, and has for some time. And that's the end of section 3 of chapter 13. We'll finish chapter 13. Now I'm gonna go ahead and read this afterward. I'm gonna read the afterward, and that'll be the end of the book. I'm gonna read this afterward. Afterward. That'll be the end of the book. Oh, another body book on the list. Because I feel if I don't read it now, then I'm gonna mess around and be 2-3 days before I read the end. The afterward. Although standard vaudeville style slapstick and one-liner comedy never disappeared, the nation's avant-garde humor from mid-century to early 80s was largely fueled by writers and comedians such as Ralph Ellison, Lenny Bruce, Kurt Vonnegut, Mel Brooks, Mort Sahl, Dick Gregory, George Carlin, Ishmael Reed, and Richard Pryor. Satirists who use humor to enlighten, awaken, and expose societal repression, nagging governmental malfeasance, malfeasance, or the personal angst that dogged many Americans. There was a serious edge to the era's wit, a preeminent concern with engaging the shallow and wrong-headed. More often than not, it probed, raped, and dissected even as it inspired knee-slapping goughs. Somewhere between Ronald Reagan's presidency with its me generation self-obsessions and the Clinton-Lewinsky debacle, however, the animus that had stoked the previous generation's cutting-edge humor was undermined by a nearly all-pervading anime. An anime, what is that? Anime. Anomie. A-N-O-M-I-E. A-N-O-M-I-E. Anomie. A-N. A-N-O-M-I-E. A-N. O M Anonymous A-N-O-M-I-E. It's not in here. Oh, it's not in here. Oh well. I don't want to look. I don't want to take the time to look on it. I'll pull out my other dictionary. I just don't want to take the time. Anonymous. By the star-struck 90s, an era when the public's attention was consumed by celebrity, no matter how ill-gained and media-fashioned celebrities, from the oddball trailer park philanderers who peopled the Jerry Springer show to a rabid special prosecutor and the wrath of frolicsome athletes and entertainers whose personal escapades outstrip their professional performances. Comedic passion and zeal for what essayist George Meredith called fair justice had been mostly diverted or shelved. Social concern and purpose were largely abandoned as humorists wallowed in titillating sexual gags, or turned to claustrophobic comic forays into quirks of their own individual personalities. We had once again entered, as an astute journalist suggests, an era of yucks for yuck's sake. On the mainstream comedy scene, the 90s most popular television show was Seinfeld. While undoubtedly both clever and funny, it was a sitcom that at the outset proclaimed that it was about nothing then nothing. It was about nothing. It was about nothing. Then, instantly demonstrated its dedication to that novel theme in each episode. Its quirky cast of characters, a group of yuppie-ish, Upper West Side New Yorkers, regularly flaunted an elitist insouciance and flippant disregard for anything beyond their own immediate self-gratification. Few previous shows had elevated the trivia of daily life to the realm of national infatuation as successfully or humorously and perhaps more tellingly mirrored the country's general ennui and escapist and narcissistic bent with such candor. Now, the ruder side and current comedy scene was and still is amply illustrated by the Howard Stern radio show and returns of the Fox television sitcom Married with Children. Stern's radio show rocketed to number one of New York City, where it was tuned in by one of four males between the ages of 18 and 35 in 1991. And is now also among the top-rated syndicated shows in the nation. His blunt, free-wheeling commentary on everything from contemporaries and genitalia to politics and public figures has found an eager nationwide audience. And by the late 90s, he had parlayed the show into two best-selling books, a successful movie, Private Parts, and a CBS network television show geared to compete with Saturday Night Live. This despite a flood of lawsuits and a frequent critical dismissal. Remember those tasteless jokes people told in junior high school? Well, Howard Stern does. One critic wrote, Stern has built a personal media empire on one crude brick at a time, on a foundation of saying precisely what people don't want him to say. If it offends or outrages, Stern wants to be the first to say it. Much the same could be said of Married with Children, a sitcom focused on the dysfunctional family with members who make some of the television's most craven and bizarre talk show guests appear exemplary. The success of Stern and Married with Children has prompted some television executives to up the ante, and seemingly with each new season, the home screen is filled with cruder, even more tasteless comedy fare. If you listened to Lenny Bruce 30 years ago, that was so outrageous it got him arrested. Now you hear that stuff on television. John Buskin, a humor writer said, John Buskin, a humor writer said, the edge has to keep moving. It's like inflation. At some point, it's going to be opening people's stomach up and pulling out their guts for a laugh. Curiously, animated cartoon shows such as The Simpsons and South Park were far edgier than the real-life television sitcoms they competed against. Even those shows, however, did not always avoid the penchant for gratuitous nastiness and adolescent ribaldry that was the hallmark of MTV's popular animated cartoon entry, Beavis and Butthead. I remember that shit. Hollywood comedy films were as, if not more, telling. Even as pundits and critics complained about the general dumbing down of society, the youth-obsessed film industry offered a diet of sophomore comedies that seemed to condone know-nothingness and imbecile behavior. Jim Carrey rose to megastar status in the series of comedies that featured mean-spirited pranks, pratfalls, and dubious fixations on the waywardness of bodily excretions that often made the gaseous singing cowboy sequence in Blazing Saddles, 1974, seem cast or chaste. And the brothers Peter and Bobby Farley raiding the coffers and prep school humor brought as Dumb and Dumber. A sequel is reportedly planned. Kingpin and There's Something About Mary. The box office smash released in 1998 was described by the semi-skeptical critic as a sick, offensive, breathtaking skeptical, but still received rare reviews from most commentators. As on television, a snickering youth-oriented. Oh, let me find my little spot so I can get my little spot back and read good. Okay, you don't have to wait. As on television, a snickering, youth-oriented, crude, and rude comedic approach dominated Hollywood films. The stand-up comedy club scene also reflected the era's de-emphasis of social relevant wit. Although they had soared in popularity during the 70s and early 80s, comedy clubs slumped during the 90s. And with the decrease in attendance, many club owners took their cue from the film and television industries, targeting younger audiences. Well, they're just trying to make their money. That's all they doing. Trying to what can we do to keep the money going and flowing? Hit the babies. Hit the babies. Targeting younger audiences, they featured comics who appealed to a generation reared on sensationalism, mesmerized by attitude, and numbed by a steady blitzkrieg of sound bites. Look, it's almost impossible to get a spot in a comedy club if you try to do serious social commentary. A young comic who works both the comic club and the college circuit told me, unless you want to get pushed back to the 1:00 check spot, taking a mic when waitresses are handing out checks, forget about saying anything that might make people think while they're laughing. The attention span is just not there. Nobody wants to hear it anymore. Certainly not the owners. His opinion was reinforced by Joseph Garrison, a Long Island University history professor. The humor I see on television and in the clubs today is the humor of the narcissist. Dorenson said during a 1997 interview, the humor is of trivia, of people engaging in lives of little substance and less social significance. Given the overall state of mainstream comedy in the 90s, it is not surprising that African American humor reflects the larger trend. Let me see how many pages I got, man. about 4 pages. In fact, to a great extent, it has been influential in shaping their comedy. Along with groundbreaking work of Lenny Bruce and uninhibited comic approach and success of Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy set the tone for today's humor. Bruce and Pryor, however, nearly always used profanity and the assault on taboo subjects to make a larger point or unveil such aspects of societal hypocrisy. Moreover, Pryor was often coached, or Pryor most often couched his profanity in the voices of his characters he created. His expertise surfaced during depth characterizations of the societal outcasts that he ultimately humanized and elevated. Among both mainstream and African American comedians who followed and attempted to emulate him, however, obscenity, shallow sensationalism, and shock for shock's sake have often emerged as the central element. Whereas for Bruce, Pryor, and most often Murphy, the vernacular was a vehicle used to create comedy. For far too many of their followers, the humor was reduced to scatological vernacular speech itself. At best, it was a case of discarding the seed and fruit while futilely attempting to draw comic nourishment from the rind. And for most African American comedians who chose that tact, the result was pointless, most tasteful, juvenalia that meshed with and contributed to the listless state of the general comic sense. Oh man, I need some candy or something. We almost there. We almost there. Stick with me, my people. Stick with me. I'm gonna push through. 3 more pages. All right. The rich traditions of African American humor reach as far back as the old John slavery tales, and American humor, with roots as deep as Taiwan Pudd'nhead Wilson, and Huckleberry Finn, had been merged in an unholy alliance that spawned the likes of Andrew Dice Clay, Howard Stern, and such television and film productions as Def Comedy Jam and Booty Call. The setback that African American comedy had experienced in the early 90s was partially due to the lure of Hollywood films. Along with a score of rap artists, many of the most talented and promising comedians of the 70s and 80s were enticed by the challenge of an acting career and drawn to the film capital as producers sought to increase the Black presence and capitalize on the popularity of rap music and its attendant hip-hop culture. Among them were Whoopi Goldberg, Damon and Keenan Ivory Wayans. Their younger brothers, Sean and Marlon, would follow. Martin Lawrence, Jamie Foxx, Tommy Davidson, Sinbad, and Chris Rock. The most notable successes are, of course, Whoopi Goldberg, who has proven herself an estimable actress in a series of dramatic and comic roles, and Eddie Murphy, who, despite some uneven performances, has established himself as a marketable movie star. Their absences from the club circuit represent the most grave loss to African American stand-up comedy. Most others, however, like Richard Pryor before them, have found that despite the profitability and instant visibility it may confer, Hollywood cinema is frequently a murky netherworld where genuine comic talent is quickly engulfed and subverted. A few former comedians turned actors, most notably Damon and Keenan Wayans and Martin Lawrence, have shined as comic sidekicks in successful thrillers. But most have found themselves mired in stereotypical roles in low-budget romps such as Booty Call, one gag sexual farce starring Jamie Foxx and Tommy Davidson that leeringly traced and that raunchy antics of two friends frantically searching for the condoms they need to bring a double date to the successful conclusion. Get in the butt. The title originated with a joke by the comic Bill Bellamy. Any lady who accepts a call from a gentleman at 2 a.m. has got to know he's not calling because he wants to talk. It's a booty call. It became part of the hip-hop jargon, even as the film itself stirred a heated debate in the Black community. Critics such as Bill Cosby and some NAACP chapters denounced the movie as detrimental to the image of African Americans. And even Fox said, I agree with some of the stuff Cosby complained about. Despite the criticism, however, the booty call genre of comedy dominated mass market offerings of African American entertainment. On television, the startup networks, Fox, WB, and UPN, attempting to corner the young African American market, flooded the airways with a raft of hip-hop oriented sitcoms, many of which attracted the same angry disapproval that had greeted their film brethren. Fox's long-running entry, Martin, which starred Martin Lawrence as a zany Detroit DJ, was among the best and most successful of these shows. Its success, in large part, accrued from Lawrence's physical humor and ability to undercut his character's posturing machismo with impish vulnerability. Despite hints of misogyny, homophobia, and the cartoonish substantial audiences, not surprisingly, it was ranked in the top 5 among viewers aged 12 to 17 and was ranked near the top among 11 and under set. I'm huge with the under 5 crowd, Lawrence quipped. Overall, however, the leering booty call variety of television sitcoms did not fare as well. The shows generally... No, sir, I'm reading. When I'm done reading, sir, I will come put it on. I only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages. Damn, a lot more than what I thought. Yeah. Oh Lord, 5 pages. What's it take so long? We're gonna push. Overall, however, the leering booty call variety of television sitcoms did not fare as well. The show's general predictability and banality were often ridiculed on the comedy club circuit. The young stand-up comedian, Billy Wade, for instance, alluded to the undercurrent of dissent in the Black community and drew laughs and applause when he sardonically labeled UPN the network of unpaid Negroes. Nevertheless, many mainstream publishers rushed to the exploit of the 90s stereotypical booty call genres, releasing a raft of comic novels that frequently hinted at the nature of the book's content with garish, cartoon-like covers that belied any pretense of literary merit. Belied. By the 90s, a general loom, if not outright deflation, had overtaken African American humor. Many stellar comedians of the 60s and 70s had retired or withdrawn from the stage, and Dick Gregory briefly returned to the stage in the early 90s, but his comeback floundered. Although his 60s television shows were finding a new audience on cable TV land, Flip Wilson instantly remained out of the comic spotlight. And a seriously ailing Richard Pryor, honored with the John F. Kennedy Center's first annual Mark Twain Humor Award in 1998, was no longer capable of making even the brief appearances that had drawn crowds to Los Angeles comedy clubs during the early 90s. Still, near the end of the decade, there were some bright spots. Bill Cosby's latest sitcom was thriving, bringing his inimitable wit, as well as a rare view of average middle-class African Americans and their humor to network television. George Wallace remained a beacon for sharp, eye-opening quips in clubs and on television talk shows. Although his brief stint as a late-night talk show host had ended, Sinbad was successfully amusing audiences with comic routines that demonstrated that genitalia jokes and gutter language were not Black comedians' only contribution to adult humor. And while he had not attained the superstardom that many had predicted, Dave Chappelle was gaining increased recognition as the intelligent humorist with the acute eye for social commentary. In addition, there are a host of relatively unknown, mostly younger comics on the horizon. Among them are the previously mentioned Bill Bellamy. Despite his role in the predictably trashy How to Be a Player in 1997, Billy Wade, who, notwithstanding his talent, is still struggling to gain a foothold on the New York club circuit, and Lehan Lord, who edged toward national recognition with exposure on such shows as Stand Up Spotlight, Apollo's Comedy Hour, and Girls Night Out. The flashes of brilliance shown by these and other young comedians seem to indicate a bright future for both themselves and African American comedy in general. When all is said and done, however, Richard Pryor remains the standard with which performance comedy is judged and by which most comedians, Black or white, judge themselves. In his absence, during the 90s, that standard has only been approximated by two African American comedians, Paul Mooney and Chris Rock. Mooney is a West Coast-based comedian who has recently earned wits on the scene. Earned a reputation as one of the most acerbic, socially aware African American wits on the scene. Although he began doing stand-up in high school and performed occasionally during the 70s and 80s, his reputation in the comedy world was established as a writer. For a time, Pryor was his mentor, and Mooney focused on collaborating with and writing for him. He wrote for Pryor's 1974 NBC TV specials and is, in fact, the author of some of Pryor's best lines, including the well-known quip about America's legal system. I went down here looking for justice, and that's what I found. Just us. He also wrote for Red Fox and Eddie Murphy, and contributed to such television shows as Sanford and Son, The Flip Wilson Show, In Living Color, and Saturday Night Live. The then controversial Word Association skit, which aired on SLN or Saturday Night Live during the 70s and featured Chevy Chase, as a personal director and Pryor as a prospective employee, was among his many credits. Was among his many credits. The conclusion of their encounter, which begins innocently, but dissolves into a duel of racial epithets following: Chase, colored, redneck, jungle bunny, peckerwood, Birdhead, cracker. Spirit chunker, white trash. Jungle bunny, honky. Speed, honky honky. Nigga, dead honky. When Pryor's illness forced him into retirement, however, Mooney actively took to the stage. And since the late 80s, his stature as one of the 90s most outspoken and irreverent black stand-up comedians has been solidified. His first album, Race, which was released in 1993, was an instant hit, and like Pryor's Craps, After Hours was adopted as a kind of comic Bible by many younger African Americans. His second album, Masterpiece, in 1997, is quietly gaining the same underground stature. Although he projects some of the attitude associated with Def Comedy Jam performers and has appeared on the program, his comedic style is far removed from the shallow, crotch-grabbing profanity and sexism that often characterize that show. Instead, Mooney's humor is insistently issue-based, a fusion of Dick Gregory's cerebral satirical approach and Pryor's probing rascality. His act moves from trenchant material, such as his Blame a Nigga routine, in which he satirically excoriates mainstream society for its predisposition to perceive blacks as criminals, to more whimsical bits about the use of the racial stereotype on popular culture. I hate these commercials with the little nigga raisins singing, heard it through the grapevine. First, they had Ray Charles as a reason. Then I woke up one morning and Michael Jackson was a reason. I don't like him. How would you feel if I got a goddamn marshmallow, put some little arms and legs on it, and had it singing Surfing USA? Everybody go surfing, surfing USA. I remember that shit. Or shifting to topical politics. In 1985, he flatly dismissed Dole as the viable presidential candidate with the irreverent one-liner, "My president has got to be able to salute the flag." Or Mooney's material ranks with that of the best satiric stand-up working comedy clubs today. It is in delivery and stage presence that he is outdistanced by Pryor, polished veterans such as Cosby, and even the young upstart Chris Rock. Mooney's uncompromising stance on racial and social issues and his determination to frequently aim his humor at white audiences has also curtailed his emergence as a premier funny man. Despite the advice of agents and managers, he insists on pointedly addressing the absurdity of the racial situation and lampooning blacks and whites who waffle on issues of social injustice. That steadfast conviction, along with a sometimes overzealous tendency to probe and ridicule members of the audience, has slowed his entry into mainstream venues such as primetime guest appearances, cable specials, and even some clubs. But when criticized about his often splenetic alienating of whites patrons during performances, Mooney's response is direct. My job is to make white people mad, that they have to learn how to laugh at themselves. Chris Rock also insists on pushing listeners to the edge, but he has had few problems with audience reception or, of late, critics. During the 90s, The 32-year-old Brooklyn-reared comedian has risen from a marginal spot among the Saturday Night Live cast and lukewarm recognition as a brash, rising hip-hop star to emerge as one of America's most popular and notable comic talents. Hailed for his 1996 HBO special, Bring the Pain, and recently cited by People magazine as one of the most influential African American performers in Hollywood, Rock seems poised to reaffirm and perhaps extend the social and political awareness displayed in African American humor during the 70s. Rock began his stand-up career as a teenager in the mid-80s. A fidgety but undoubted neophyte, he appeared on the HBO special Uptown Comedy Express in 1987 with a half dozen more seasoned comics. Bristling with attitude, he opened with, "I was driving down the street and I saw this prostitute. Asked her how much. She said for $300. I'll do anything you want." I said, "Paint my house, bitch." They don't want to hear that. They don't want to paint no, they don't want to hear that. "Paint my house, bitch." Since that cheeky but less than pungent debut on national television, Rock has sharpened his observational skills and moved his sights to more formidable targets. A 3-year stint on SNL, or Saturday Night Live, where he wrote but made only infrequent appearances on camera, accelerated his schooling. Then, in 1993, he co-wrote and produced CB4, a cinema parody of gangster rap that may have signaled his abandoning the limited confines of hip-hop humor to test more challenging grounds. And after leaving Saturday Night Live, he returned to the club circuit and, during the mid-'80s, attracted national attention as the voice of Little Penny Hardaway. I didn't know that. I didn't know he was the voice of Little Penny. National attention as the voice of Lil Penny Hardaway on Nike sneakers commercials and as a Comedy Central political correspondent at the Republican convention. We almost done. One more page. The release of his HBO comedy special in 1996 and debut of his Cable Ace award-winning The Chris Rock Show in 1997 solidified his position as what many now call the smartest, most dangerous, most fearless comic working in America. In fact, fearlessness, the courage to pioneer territory that most wits and even politicians and pundits diligently avoid is the element that perhaps most distinguishes Rock's humor. As did Lenny Bruce, George Carlin, and Richard Pryor, Rock has demonstrated a remarkable ability to boldly leap into the briar patch of ethnic and religious taboos, and like some frolicsome Brer Rabbit, glidely emerged from the no man's land unscathed. Now on stage, as he paces back and forth in what he calls stick and move, joke and move approach, his satirical targets range from the fidelity in relationships to the inequities of divorce laws, from the absurdity of age-old religious practices. My big brother is a junkie alcoholic, but doesn't eat pork because pork's no good for you. A pork chop is your friend. To two such topical subjects as Americans' reaction to the O.J. Simpson trial, I ain't seen white people that mad since they cancel MASH. Moreover, unlike many of his contemporaries, his quips are aimed at the foibles and absurdities of both black and white life. He readily satirizes whites who hastily lock their car doors or scamper from elevators when an African American approaches. But he is equally acerbic about black inanity. On his 1997 CB, Roll with the New, for instance, Rock variously aims his gibes at Mayor Marion Barry, who ran against him. Who was so bad that they lost to a crackhead. Rap music and niggas, as opposed to blacks in general. The latter routine, as the following suggests, is among the most pungent and controversial of his material. There's like a civil war going on with black people, and there's two sides, black people and niggas. And niggas have got to go. Hey, I love black people, but I hate niggas. And boy, I wish they'd let me join the Ku Klux Klan. Nothing make a nigga happier than not knowing. Ask a nigga a question. Hey, I don't know that shit. Keep it real. Niggas love to keep it real. Keeping it real. Niggas love to keep it real. Real dumb. Niggas hate knowledge. Shit, niggas break into your house. You want to save you money? Put it in the book. Put it in the book. A few comics could or would attempt that type of self-critical raillery before the black audiences, on or off the stage at a time when, in the hood, dissing someone is tantamount to a death wish. In fact, since the 70s, when Richard Pryor was at his peak, no one had successfully tried it. To his credit, Chris Rock has taken the clamorous hip-hop style too often associated with grandiose posturing and bull-headed allegiance to everything currently designated as black and reshaped it to fit a grander concept of comedy. Like many of the best African-American humorists from slavery to the present, he seems to understand that humor is most effectively used when it not only amuses, but also unmasks the illusions of the hoodwinked or deceived. Anyone mesmerized by their own wishful vanities or the biasness of their peers. The ability to set oneself firmly against the grain, to perceive wrong-headed prescriptions and speak out against them has always been the cornerstone of socially relevant comedy. Chris Rock is among the few contemporary African-American comedians who have accepted that challenge. And in his latest work, he, like Richard Pryor, has definitely combined that demanding approach with a rare ability to amuse and entertain while avoiding the gracious sound bites, narcissism, and sensationalism that shapes the comedy of too many of his contemporaries. Historically framing his own humor and alluding to the social firmament that inspired his comic forerunners. In a recent interview, he readily voiced his admiration for comedians such as Dick Gregory, George Carlin, and Pryor. The comedians during the civil rights era were great. That stuff wasn't happening in the 80s. It's heated up politically, and I'm just lucky to be here. Chris Rock's success, however, is not adequately explained by either chance or a mere fluke of timing. As with the best of his predecessors, dedication to his craft and a rare comic vision have accelerated his rise. You know, I meet a lot of the comics that have come up In the Def Comedy Jam generation, Rock told an interviewer in 1996, and frankly, the reason a lot of those young comics suck is that they don't study comedy. They look at Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy, and that's it. There's a much broader spectrum to get into. I'm still studying. I want to be a comedy Jedi. That, of course, is something that only time will reveal. But for the present, Rock is working the various elements of that have traditionally defined African American humor with more wit and elan than any of his peers. His humor is a refreshing antidote to the ennui of that consumed the 80s and the early 90s. Mel Watkins, October of 1998. Oh, my first year out of high school. Oh, I was out of high school. Graduated in 98. But that's it. That was it. That is Mr. Mel Watkins' book on the real side, African American history from slavery to Chris Rock. We have finally finished it. Finally. That's my fault, you know. I understand, man. I'm the one with bullshit. Taking long stints and breaks, and I had other shit going on. Fixing the house, repainting, and all type of other shit. As my brother would say, I had too many irons on the fire. But hey, it is what it is. We back. We finally got it out of there. We knocked it out. We knocked it out. The last, chapter or so was funny for sure. So I don't know which next book to read is the next thing. So I was able to grab a hold of Miss Zora Neale Hurston's Mules and Men, which is a book spoken about in here. So definitely on the list I want to read. I'm just scared I'm not going to do it justice. With the stories it's a lot of Mules and Men is based on a lot of so-called African American folklore. So let me see. This is of the forward of Mules and Men. For the student of cultural history, Mules and Men is a treasure of Black Americans' folklore as collected by a famous storyteller and anthropologist who grew up hearing the songs and sermons, sayings, and tall tales that have formed the oral history of the South since the time of slavery. As Zora Neale Hurston writes about her trip to her hometown of Eatonville, Florida, where she went to gather material, it was a hilarious night, with a pinch of everything social mixed with the storytelling. Some of the stories were the familiar drummer type of tale about two Irishmen, Pat and Mike, or two Jews, as the case might be. Some were the European folk tales, undiluted with Jack and the Beanstalk. Others had slight social variations, but Negro imagination of the facile that there was little need for outside help. Set intimately within the social context of Black life, the stories, big old lies, songs, voodoo customs, and superstitions recorded in these pages capture the imagination and bring back to life the humor and wisdom that is the unique heritage of American Blacks. Zora Neale Hurston, 1891 to 1960, was a novelist, folklorist, and anthropologist whose fictional and factual accounts of Black heritage are unparalleled. She is the author of Jonah's Gourd Vine, Their Eyes Were Watching God, Tell My Horse, and Dust Tracks on the Road, as well as Mules and Men. It's definitely one I was thinking about reading. I definitely want to get to because it's based off of this one. I have definitely a couple of books to go. Let's see, we're gonna pull it from. I'll put this on a read. Okay. So I definitely also have these to read. This is gonna be doozy. What's that? Yes, sir, you can. So I definitely want to read this brother I know, Azaniah. This is Azaniah's book, Who Blessed You? 3 relationships that transformed my life. We're definitely going to I'm definitely going to read that one. I'm just not sure the order. I think I want to read this one next. I'm just not sure. I don't want to mess it up. Let me see what this is. This look like some this is like some hoodoo stuff. Let's see what it say. It say to make people love you. To make a man come home. Let's see what it say. Take 9 deep red and pink candles, red or pink candles. Write his name 3 times on each candle. Wash the candle with Van Van. Put the name 3 times on paper and place under the candles. And call the name of the party 3 times as the candle is placed at the hour of 7, 9, or 11. Damn, there's some stuff in here. What is that? Read that. What does that say?
Book.
Why read that, boy?
Bible.
Okay, thank you. Prescriptions of root doctors. You got gonorrhea? Okay. 50 cents of iodide potash or 2 quarts of water. Boil down to 1 quart. Add 2 teaspoons of Epsom salt. Take a big swallow 3 times a day. Ooh, Lord. A good handful of maypop roots, 1 pint ribbon cane syrup, 1/2 plug of Brown's Mule tobacco cut up. Add 50 cents of iodide potash and take 3 times a day as tonic. That's for gonorrhea. You got lockjaw? This is what you do. Draw out the nail, beat the wound, and squeeze out all the blood possible. Then take a piece of fat bacon, some tobacco, and a penny, and tie it on the wound. Draw out the nail and drive it in the green tree on the sunrise side, and the place will heal. Damn. You sick to your stomach? Don't worry. Make a tea of parched rice and bay leaves, 6 of them. Give a cup at a time. Drink no other water. Oh, Lord, this boy looking at me. Yes, sir. No, I'm not trying to. Look, I'm not about to start another reading, son. Golly. Golly, you pick a head. Yeah, but we're going to read one of these first. It's going to be Mules and Men, or Who Blessed You, or, I know I'm going to read this one last, Medical Apartheid. I'm going to read this one, but it's going to be last. The Medical Apartheid. Yeah, I told my brother I was going to read this book, so I definitely going to get the book in. But I kind of want to read this Mules and Men, since we just read it. Yes, sir. That's what it's called. Mules and Men. Mules and Men by Zora Neale Hurston. I think we'll do it that way. I think we'll probably go Mules and Men. We'll do Mules and Men, Who Blessed You, and then Medical Apartheid. We'll probably read it like that. Yeah, it doesn't matter. All right, let me put this up. But yeah, man, today was one of the longest ones. But we had to finish the book. I did not want to waste no time. Let me mark my shit right now. Ooh, let me put my other body on the list, man. I got another body. I stepped on another book. Book stepped on.
He's so creepy.
Mm-hmm. That puts me to 21 books. 21 books that I have tried to see what I can learn and grow from. Well, 21 books since the time I've started keeping track.
He's so terrible.
21 books. Bum. 21. I'm on now. 21, boy. I got 21. 21. Hey, but that's reading with SHILO, man. Thank y'all. We have finished the book. Oh, we'll start another one next time. So till next time, man. Appreciate everybody who left comments, like the live, came in, watched for a moment, or watched the whole time. I appreciate it. I thank you. We'll keep pushing until next time, man. SHILO out. SHILO out. It's been reading with SHILO. I'm out here.